Good morning, haha, Jen, everyone, and welcome to another episode of How I Met Your Mortgage. As always, I'm your host, Adam Smith, with Just the Tips Coaching, and with us, pretty much as always, is our marketing director and one of our other coaches, Jen Waymower. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning, Adam.
Did I force you into a good morning?
Yep.
All right.
All
right.
It might be afternoon already.
It could be, yeah, people watch and listen in syndication. It could be 11 o'clock at night. Fair enough. We've got a really cool guest for you guys today. We've obviously had this one on the books for some time. I can't even imagine for how long at this point. But with us today is David Hakimi. Good morning, David.
Hey, good morning, Adam. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us. I know it's difficult to take time out, particularly on a Monday with the real estate market the way that it is, with your real estate market the way that it is. And I know that we've had this on the books for a long time. So thank you for being patient with us and hanging out long enough to let us get you on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. No problem.
So, David, let's certainly cover some of the content that we do in pretty much every episode for, oh gosh, we're well into our fourth year now of this, so I don't know, a couple of hundred episodes. But our audience certainly knows that for someone to be a guest on How I Met Your Mortgage, that they're doing good work. They're what would be defined in the industry as a top producer. And they really want to know about our guests, your background, how you got into real estate, what you were doing before that led you into it, how long your career has been, what your team structure looks like, what your lead generation stuff looks like. So give us some insight as to the world of David.
Yeah, absolutely. I graduated college back in '97, and I goofed around in the college town for a few years before deciding to play grown up and move to Dallas. My first job in Dallas when I got back from college was with Syntex Home Equity. They were the subprime lending division of Syntex Builder. So I worked as a retention loan officer for Syntex in their Dallas division. Did that for about a year, and then I decided I was ready to move to Denver with my now wife. At the time, she was my girlfriend. We moved up here, and I transferred into one of the Syntex branches. Did that for about 3 or 4 months, and then one of my roommates back at the time had gone to work for a mortgage brokerage, and he listened to everything that I was telling him I endured at work on a daily basis, trying to sell people 5 points. So I had 228 subprime arms and so forth, and how we had to scratch for any kind of business that we could find. And he told me, our phone just rings. We've got people calling in wanting us to reduce their rate, and it's easy, and we don't have any of the brain damage you described. So I asked him if he'd give me an interview with the broker, and I went over and my eyes were open to real lending, not subprime lending. And, of course it was 10 times easier, and I excelled at it. So I, became a mortgage loan officer, and I did that for about 8 years. Finally, I actually had my own small brokerage at the end, and I was doing okay. I mean, I was never a real rock star because I was a little afraid to do purchase business. It was always a refi-based business model that we did. A lot of mail pieces, lots of mailing out to people. Oddly enough, since I had an insight into the subprime lending industry, I realized they put a lot of people into subprime loans that weren't really subprime. So we did really around '08, and it seems like within about a week's time, all 12 of my wholesale banks went out of business. So I was a mortgage broker with no one to broker a file to really quickly, and it was a little scary, and I had no idea what my next move was, and I realized I got to figure out something quickly, or I'm going to end up like all the other people with a foreclosure sign in their front yard. So I actually ate crow and sucked it up and went back and sold appliances for a couple of years at Ultimate Electronics. It was definitely humiliating after being a mortgage broker and having my own company for a few years to have to go back and sell retail. But I did what I had to do for a few years to keep my chin above water during the crash, during the Great Recession. And then the irony of that was, of course, if you're from Colorado, Ultimate went out of business a couple years later. So the job that I took to eat, grow, and suck it up and do something to stay employed. Went under. They put us on unemployment when the stores all shut down. And, as fate would have it, my dad passed away about the same time. He left me a little bit of money. He wasn't a rich guy. I think I inherited 60, 70,000 bucks from him. But I realized at that point in time, I got to do something with it. I'm on unemployment. I've got a little bit of cushion. I got some inheritance in the bank. And I went back to get my real estate license and finished that up. And, had about 30 grand left. And, I said, it's all or nothing at this point. I dumped all of it into marketing. I built a website. I bought Zillow leads, bought signs, and did everything I could to try and launch my business. And I actually went to work for a really small brokerage called Brokers Guild here in Denver. Actually, they're big. They've got 11 or 1,200 people, but they run like a small brokerage. They've got super low fees and almost no training, no support. So I literally had to figure out the whole real estate game on my own. I mean, fortunately, I had a lot of sales experience and a mortgage background, so it wasn't completely foreign. And you're not supposed to do it, but I didn't listen to the naysayers, and I actually sold 14 houses that first year. But I did it all off of Zillow leads. They were in a really pathetic zip code because even back then Zillow stayed sold out and it was hard to get a good zip, and not having a lot of feedback or reviews, it was probably best that I started in a starter home area. So I think that first year I don't think I sold a house over $185,000, but I sold 14 of them, and it was just enough that my business was starting to take off, and I ran out of money. And it hadn't quite hit that point where it was sustainable yet because the deals were so small, and I was trying to pump everything back into the business to grow it. That I had purchased a car with part of the inheritance, so I took that down to the credit union and I took a loan out on it. Got another 15,000 bucks out of that car and pumped that into the business, and that was enough to get me over the hump. And the rest is history. That second year, I think I sold 32 houses. And the year after that, it was 43. The year after that, I think I hit 65. So it started going.
That's a fantastic story.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. And and don't get me wrong, we have a client base, and we certainly have viewership in more rural parts of the country where 185,000 might be the top end of the market. Certainly the average. Who are we talking to when we did the Mile High Mastermind last fall, Jen? Was that Crystal in Kansas somewhere?
Yes.
And her average purchase price was like 165 or 185. So yeah, that's not unreasonable. Although I think what I really want to drill down on, what I really want our audience to capture here, is that you really had no working knowledge of the real estate business other than from the mortgage lending side. And a lot of your purchase business at that time was because you were working with a builder. That's obviously a different animal altogether. And that with no real support, no marketing support, no education support, you managed to do more deals in your first year than 80% of the real estate agents do in their first 5 or 10.
Well, I should back you up. I did have some education support. I do have a marketing degree from Texas A&M with an emphasis on promotion strategy and advertising. So I wasn't completely green. That's my aptitude. So I took to that pretty well. And I had 25 years of sales experience because I worked my way through college selling appliances as well, and did that for probably 7-8 years. Sold health club memberships before that. So, if you read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, he talks about the 10,000 hours that you need to do anything to become an expert. And I think by the time I graduated college, I'd already had enough time selling refrigerators and washers at Sears and Circuit City that I was probably close to my 10,000 hours before I ever got my marketing degree. So, I did have the sales background and the advertising knowledge.
Yeah, Circuit City, there's another relic, from the days of old. So
Sears went out of business too.
Yeah. So, David, it seems to me that really anybody with a good work ethic and a solid sales and marketing background would probably plug really well into real estate.
Maybe. I think so. And in all fairness and all honesty, I think it was easier when I got into it. At the time I started back in 2012, I was able to buy 6 months worth of Zillow advertising for $1,800. And now put that in perspective, you can't buy enough of a share of a single zip to get decent calls for less than 3,500 or $4,000 a month. So it was a little bit easier then. Zillow hadn't quite established itself as what it is now. It was a big bargain comparatively. I'd be nervous if I had to try and start over the same way that I started then. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Anybody that has the work ethic and is willing to put in the 50, 60-hour weeks initially, can probably get it off the ground. I can tell you my wife hated my new career choice for the first couple of years. It was a, bit of a culture shock, never getting to see me, when I was putting in 60, 65 hours.
Yeah, Liz used to say that all the time. She had a love-hate relationship with my work ethic. Yeah, no question. But it does pay dividends, and Jen hears me say this all the time. She knows Corey well, and years ago he had asked me at dinner one night before a conference I was speaking at, what's the one thing you would do to, what's the one thing you would tell someone to do to get where you're at? And I said, work hard for 20 years. That's that. There's no magic potion. There's no unicorns. If you work hard, odds are good you're going to have success. And yeah, having a sales and marketing background certainly helped propel you there. I would say that a lot of our audience, and obviously the majority of real estate agents, wouldn't even fathom 14 deals in their first year. They can't even imagine what that's like. Even if they're $185,000 deals in a market where, gosh, I don't know, Denver at the time, what do you figure the average was? Probably 300, 350. I mean, now we're, 550, 600, and tomorrow it'll be 700, and the day after it'll be 800. But that's just, me being, well, that's another subject. Maybe we'll talk about it today. Maybe we won't. All right, so David, what does it look like today? You're not with Brokers Guild.
No.
Okay. You've got a team.
I do have a team.
Okay, so tell us what it looks like today. What bridge that gap for us.
Well, the catalyst for leaving Brokers Guild was we built a team. I started to do radio ads on Comedy 103.1. We started to build a pretty substantial business. I think that last year at Brokers Guild, we had a small, loose-knit team, and I think our GCI for that year was somewhere around $875,000 between four of us. So, it was respectable for a small, loose-knit team that was fairly new. The problem that I had at that previous brokerage was they just weren't set up to accommodate teams. They were mostly meant for, independent people to essentially park their license and do what they could. But, we won't talk bad about them, but long story short, they let one of my agents close $50,000 worth of commission, and they didn't bother to tell me. And the guy, of course, didn't bother to tell them that I was due a split on it. So I bled $50,000 worth of stolen leads that year. And it stung. So, it basically caused the catalyst for us to start to shop for a brokerage that had infrastructure in place to accommodate teams. We knew we'd have to pay a little bit bigger split. But, my other pain point at the time, too, was being on the radio. I think I was 3 years in on Comedy 103.1. I was starting to build some decent name recognition with the listeners of that station, and I was getting calls for luxury listings. And quite frankly, Brokers Guild as a name just didn't cut it at the time. I'd get the luxury listings, and I'd always fall flat on the appointments. Sotheby's or Kentwood or one of the big real luxury firms at the time would always beat me for the listings. So it was getting frustrating that we didn't have team infrastructure and we didn't have the proper training or name recognition to land the big deals. And at the time, Scott Norby converted Innovative Real Estate to Berkshire Hathaway branch. I knew lots of innovative agents that raved about Scott and said, hey, he's a fantastic guy, great mentor, fantastic training. You will get everything that you're lacking, plus you'll get the name recognition of Berkshire Hathaway. So went and interviewed with him, and it was a fit. We liked him. We felt like we would grow from it, and the rest is history. I think we've been there almost 5 years now. We're coming up on our 5th year this year. To answer your question, where we are now, I still have a small team. I definitely am not a micromanager. I prefer to produce. Personal production is my thing, so I don't want a giant team that needs a lot of micromanagement. We've tried to arrive at a set of team members that are self-sufficient and do what they need to do without being told, because they're self-starters. So my management skills from standpoint of running a team are probably pathetic by most standards, but we've arrived at a structure that works for us. Last year, I think we hit 1.2 million GCI. We're in our third year now of winning Berkshire Hathaway Chairman's Circle Diamond, which is typically top half of 1% of all Berkshire Hathaway agents in the nation, or teams, all Berkshire Hathaway teams in the nation. So we're top one half of 1%. We must be doing something right at this point.
Yeah, I would say so. And are you still on the radio?
I'm not on the radio.
All right. We don't hear a lot about. I mean, obviously there aren't that many people that run ads on the radio. We don't hear a lot about it. I've got a colleague out of Colorado Springs. For those of you that aren't familiar with the immediate area, that market's about an hour and a half south of Denver, and he loves reverse mortgages. So he records a radio broadcast, I think once a week, and then he buys a bunch of time slots on the air, broadcasts it out. Obviously, terrestrial radio is a big deal still for people that would be in that reverse mortgage genre. And other than that, I mean, we don't really hear a lot about real estate agents, mortgage people being on the radio.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's three big agents here in Denver and Fort Collins that have a big radio presence. Madelum,
Chad, yeah.
Rob Kittle up in Fort Collins has a big radio presence. Madelum, and there's a couple new ones that have come along. And then, of course, you got Rex and some of the big corporate discount models that are on the radio as well, too. At one point in time, it was half of our business off of the radio. So
wow.
It was pretty substantial. The thing about radio is, unless you're on 5 or 6 stations, unless you can get to the point where you really have that giant $50,000 a month radio budget, you'll saturate the listener base of a single station. And I think that's what happened with me. We got to the point where, the commercials were still solid. We freshened up the message. We were doing everything that had always worked, and it just started to dissipate. I felt like everybody that listened to that station that needed to call me or wanted to call me had already done it. And we got to the point where we just weren't seeing the ROI on it and had to make an executive decision to pull the plug on it and put the money elsewhere. You can only spend $7,000 or $8,000 a month on an advertising avenue so long if it stops working before it puts you upside down in a hole. So we got to the point where we made the decision to back out of it and do other things with the money.
Well, let's talk about that. What are the other things? What are you guys doing what'd you do with that $7-8 grand? Where does it go to today?
I can tell you exactly what we did with it. I've got a website built on the Real Geeks platform. And at the time, it was okay. I mean, we had it built out by one of their in-house site builders, and it was a typical Real Geek site. It wasn't organically ranked or anything. It wasn't particularly large. And it was funny, the emphasis of our radio commercials when they first came out was how our site had all the listings that the nationwide sites were missing. I don't know if you remember back probably 6-7 years ago, this would have been, there was a while that Denver MLS cut Zillow off. They cut their feed off, and Zillow was 100% dependent on agents manually entering and manually removing their listings. So Zillow and Trulia got really, really inaccurate for a while. It got to the point where 80-90% of everything on Zillow was a stale listing. People would call and you'd have to tell them, hey, that thing sold 2 weeks ago. So we used that and capitalized on it. My radio commercials made a big point of that. Hey, if you're frustrated with the nationwide sites, if you're finding that everything you look at is already gone by the time you find it, log on to David Sells Denver. It's current. It's right on par with the MLS. That message hit home and blew me up. So we did really well with it. But of course, eventually Zillow fixed the problem and got a consistent feed. So that went away, but I realized after talking about how great the website was, it was probably time that we really made it great. So when we stopped the radio, I took that money and I hired 3 guys in-house, and we set out to truly try and make our website one of the top agent sites in Denver. It has about 10,000 unique pages built out now. We rank on hundreds of long-tail key terms. So I basically took every possible thing that people would ever call and ask me for, every long-tail key term, every unique search that anybody would ever do, and we built a page for it. So we built it it to one of the top single agent sites in the city of Denver. We rank on a lot of stuff. It probably catches anywhere from 40 to 70 leads a month organically. So that's what we did with it.
Wow. Okay. The ability to build that out, the knowledge base to figure out how to do that certainly exceeds the marketing education you got in Texas in the 90s.
Probably so.
All right. Yeah, that's really impressive stuff. All right, so what about going forward? What kinds of things do you foresee, not just post-pandemic, but, certainly as the technology accelerates, as the fintech companies are, more, maybe less competitive. It's hard to say. My crystal ball is in the shop. What do you see for your team going forward?
Unfortunately, I think video is where it's all moving, and I hate having a camera in my face. I'm not super comfortable on video, not being a millennial, but having to force myself to get more comfortable. So we hired a producer. I've got an in-house videographer. We've been filming a series of commercials. A podcast is actually on the short-term horizon, and maybe a video blog series that we do on YouTube. We've got the channel set up. I just haven't quite finished the production studio, but I've invested in the equipment, and we've got everything 80% of the way set up. So that's probably one of the next moves, is to do a video blog on topics. I'm actually one of 13 agents in the country that's invited to blog for NAR's YPN Lounge. So I'm one of the 13 National Association of Real Estate Bloggers. Unfortunately, I have not written as much content for them as I probably should have with that platform. But I can tell you the few articles that I have written, I still get a lot of calls off of them. One of the things I focus on is new construction. So the focus of several of my NAR articles has been various new construction topics. And, I still do a lot of business off of calls that I get from people that find those articles online. So I think that's another big push this year, is to up my video content and up my written content as well.
All right. So right off the bat, I can tell you your written content isn't enough. Whatever it is. I don't care what it is. It's probably not enough. And Jen, help David with some of this stuff, would you? Get him some video of what our studio looks like, and the YouTube channel, and setting up the different channels and the different I do this every time.
Playlists?
The different playlists, thank you, and an intro video, and so on and so forth. Yeah, get David all that information so that we can shortcut some of that for him, because yes, David, you're absolutely right. You need to do this stuff. Get over the fact that you got a camera stuck in your face. And yeah, video is king, without equivocation. And a big shout out to Frank Gray and Brian Stevens with the National Real Estate Post. They pushed me into doing a video blog with probably over a decade ago now. They certainly helped form some of what goes on here in our video cast with How I Met Your Mortgage. In fact, Brian's son, Grant, wrote our intro, did our video intro. So yeah, credit where credit's due, but this is a big deal, no question. All right, so we do have a little bit of time left, and just because you're seeing so much, you've seen the builder side, you're looking at what it means to buy a new home today, a new construction home today, you've got clients doing that. We've had a lot of discussion as of late about what the chaos of the current real estate market is, what it means for buyers, that on this pace, and just so that our audience is aware, a healthy inventory, a 6-month inventory for the Denver metro area would be about 30,000 listings. Right now we're at about 2,500. It's a major supply and demand issue. This is true in a lot of urban areas. The reason that we're seeing this kind of chaos, of course, if we continue on this trend, and rough numbers, the average single family home here is 1.2 million 10 years from now. The lending obviously doesn't keep pace. You know full well, having been a lender, that we bump loan limits roughly 6% a year, but certainly not 10 or 15. So now we're talking about, strictly jumbo lending. The typical home buyer is going to need $250,000 down. They're going to need $250,000 in household income to sustain the remainder of the debt. So we're going to get to a point where only 1%ers can buy homes, or at least that's how it looks to me. I can't think of any other solutions other than, and we had another guest on the show, Jen will probably remember who it was, said, you control what you can control. Make sure your clients know to be saving money, to be eliminating other debt, to take their own personal finances into control, because that's what they'll be able to do between now and the time they're ready to buy, whatever that may be. But how do we solve this? How do we keep from digging this hole deeper and deeper at this point?
I don't claim to be an economist, but I think the growth that we've seen in this last year and the double-digit appreciation has been attributed to two things. People are just simply afraid to let the public tour their home with the COVID pandemic. So I think we've seen a lot of resellers hold back on bringing their home to market this year. And then you've had that compounded with the fact that the government instated quantitative easing or whatever measures they put in place to push the rates down to 2.375 for a while. So you have freakishly low rates spurring freakish demand and freakishly low inventory causing the scarcity that drove things up. I personally think the consumer confidence in listing their homes will come back as the vaccine, gets more widespread and the pandemic starts to blow over. And I think too, as we've already started to see, the interest rates are coming back up. I'm afraid we're going to see rates come back into the high threes, low fours within the next year. We're going to see inventory levels return to normal as the resellers get more confidence. And I personally think we're going to see a correction. My prediction is probably a 10 to 15% correction in the next year and a half.
Okay. That would certainly be helpful. And I don't think any of us had considered the fact that there may be some significant amount of reluctance to sell due to the pandemic, or even, a reluctance to show or to have an open house or let people look at my house, and that would prevent me from putting it on the market. I hope that you're right, because that may spawn a little bit of an influx in inventory. That would certainly make an impact. I'll take 10 to 15%. At this point, I'll take anything we can get. We had been attributing a lot of it to an increase in population. People live longer. We stay in our homes longer. These are obviously long-term trends. And the problem we seem to come on so quick that it does appear to be a short-term. Well, it came on so fast that was a short term. I don't know if it's a short term problem, and I'm not an economist either. For those of you watching or listening, don't let the namesake fool you. I am not the same Adam Smith that wrote an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. That was a couple hundred years ago. I look old, but not that old. So I don't know. It just seems like it's such a pressing problem, and I really worry about people like in Jen's group who are, 20s, early 30s, want to buy a house in the next 5 to 10 years. What does that market look like for them? And God, I just cannot get my head around it.
Yeah, where I'm located up in Erie, we're right in the crux of Boulder and Denver and Broomfield. So we've got the tech corridor here. I've got all the IT startups. We've got Ball Aerospace. I think there's probably 15 different aerospace or engineering or IT companies here. It seems to me that the majority of the people that can comfortably afford the homes in this area are all either engineers, medical professionals, attorneys, or something to do with a software company. We've got a lot of Google employees around here as well. I feel like this area is going to become, it has already become, and I think it's going to become more so, super tech heavy and tech savvy. If you're not in an IT-based industry, I think you're going to find that you just can't afford to live in at least the Northwest corridor for sure.
Yeah, and for our audience that isn't familiar with the area, David's describing a bunch of bedroom communities of Boulder, Colorado, and yeah, I would consider that to be one of the most up and coming, certainly over the last 10 years, parts of the Denver metro area, Denver-Boulder metro area, and yeah, probably one of the most expensive as well. You're probably talking it rivals the opposite end of town with Castle Pines and Highlands Ranch and Lone Tree, so on and so forth. So yeah, very, very true. And David, I would be willing to bet that there is a significant amount of consumerism in our audience. And I think these people would be quite fortunate to be working with you. Why don't you give us some contact information for you?
Absolutely. You can look me up online at davidsellsdenver.com. My phone number is area code 720-370-3000. davidsellsdenver.com is probably the easiest way to get me. If you're looking specifically in the Erie area, I also have a website, eriecoloradohomes.com, all spelled out.
All right. Well, David, thank you. I know that it's amazing how quickly 30, and I know we're running over time, Jen. I see you rolling your eyes. How 30-some minutes runs past. I didn't do a good job of watching the clock today, I'll admit. And Jen, give our audience some feedback as to what our text code will get them, because it's so robust now. You've put so much great content in there, I can't keep track.
So if you text TIPS to 63566, you can get links to our podcast on Apple and on Spotify, past episodes of the show, our weekly little tip. Adam, you should be proud. I have the book sitting here this week. You can get a copy of Adam's book, Just the Tips. Find out more about our Mile High Mastermind, which is coming up in September. It'll be here before we know it. And you can book a free hour of coaching with us, lead generation coaching. So lots of good stuff.
Lots of good stuff. Well, David, thank you for joining us again. I know it's not easy to take this kind of time out with what's going on right now, and particularly as busy as you are. So we do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Adam. I appreciate it too.
Absolutely. Guys, I'm going to run our extra. David, don't go anywhere. And for those of you that watched live or listened live, thank you. If you are watching or listening in syndication, thank you for tuning in. And we will see you guys next week with another episode of How I Met Your Mortgage.